traveled to India, traded with India, attempted to conquer bits of India, and then melded their races into the soil of India. But today, I'm afraid you can no longer tell who is a descendant of the Kushans or the Scythians or the Parthians or the Bactrians or the Greeks for that matter, who also showed up. We are all this mixed up ethnicity, broadly called Indian, whereas in Colombia there are still distinctive ethnic differences which can be traced back to the last 300 or 400 years of colonial inspired migration. Nonetheless, there is perhaps that element in addition to be cited as we speak in terms of India and Colombia. In the evolution of both our countries, what's significantly evident is the impact of culture and civilization on our collective consciousness, but perhaps that, in a sense, is reflected strikingly in both our nations' desire to appreciate the diversity and pluralism that exists in both our countries. I cannot speak with any authority for Colombia. I only know for 2 days. There's a famous story told of somebody who comes across a distinguished Colombian and says, "Oh, you're visiting my country, when did you arrive?" And he says, "Oh, I arrived here to write a book." "No, when did you get here?" "I got here yesterday." "When are you leaving?" "I'm leaving tomorrow." "What is your book going to be called?" "It's going to be called Colombia, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow." Which is the sort of instant expertise I do not want to claim any credit for. But I can speak a little bit about India's attempt to manage our diversity and pluralism, because multiple identities have been fundamental to our sense of who we are in ourselves. Because India, as a country, as I said, visibly we are this undifferentiated mess of people who are descended from various groups who've mixed up with the Indian subcontinent for thousands of years. But we are now, at the same time, conscious of identities that are divided by region, by language, by caste, by religion, and yet all of these differences go together to constitute a common Indian identity. India has, in fact, if any of you have traveled to India, you will find that when you cash your money, the Indian currency comes with a denomination written out in 14 different scripts. In fact, there are 35 distinct Indian languages that are spoken by more than 1 million people each, and there are 22,000 dialects. So it's a country where language is very much a distinguishing factor. We have every religion known to mankind, with the possible exception of Shintoism, because some might argue that Shintoism bears some distinguishing Indian influences as well. And these religions have all flourished in the subcontinent, in our country, for a very long time. It may surprise some of you to know that we have Indians whose ancestors were Christian before any of your ancestors were, because many of the Christians of Kerala traced their ancestry to people who were converted by St. Thomas the Apostle, doubting Thomas, who landed on the shores of western India sometime around 52 AD and converted a number of people before he passed away on Indian soil and is buried not far from Chennai. But even earlier, the Jewish people, the oldest Jewish exile from outside Palestine, came to India. One legend has it, came with the destruction of the first temple, the second says with the destruction of the second temple. But they showed up and made such a comfortable home for themselves in India that I'm proud to say that India remains the only example in history of a Jewish diaspora that never knew a single incident of anti-Semitism throughout its existence on our soil. At least not in Indian hands. I'm afraid when the Portuguese showed up in the 16th century, there were a couple of incidents. But this too is part of our history, and part of the oral legend is that when St. Thomas landed on the shores of Kerala, he was welcomed on shore by a flute-playing Jewish girl. So that too is part of our. Islam came in the north, admittedly through conquerors, but in the south by peaceful traders and missionaries who travelled across the still waters of the Arabian Sea. We've had all of these influences, all of these religions, and they've been joined by the religions that emerged from Indian soil. Hinduism, the best known, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, have all sprouted from Indian soil and coexisted with these other faiths. And that too is part of the Indian historical experience, has been this diversity of faith. I mentioned language. Region has in a sense, a certain commonality with ethnicity, though the ethnicity may not be so visible. To the Indian eye and ear, the Punjabis but easily distinguishable from the Bengali. And indeed, one might argue that ethnically that means that Indians actually have more in common with certain foreigners, so-called, than with each other, because an Indian Punjabi or an Indian Bengali has more in common with a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi than he would with a Poonawala or a Bangalorean. So all of these things are part of the extraordinary complications of the Indian identity. So then what is India then? Is it anything more than a collection of diversities? Or is there a common idea? And that, my answer to that is yes, there is. And that idea is the idea of an Indian nation, which both emerges from an ancient civilization, is united by a shared history in a common geographical space, and perhaps above all today, is sustained by a pluralist democracy. It is there that again we come to the parallel with Colombia. Because Colombia has sustained democracy since the 1830s, on a continent which, as we know, has not always been distinguished by adherence to democratic practice in other parts of this subcontinent. And in India, we have maintained democracy for the 63 years, 62 and a half years of our independence, even while many of our neighbors succumbed to the temptations of military rule, autocratic rule of various sorts, and dictatorships. So that reverence for diversity, for democracy, is vital, but I think it's partly explained by the fact that democracy is in many ways the best tool to manage diversity. Certainly in India, we would think that any kind of autocratic rule would involve privileging people of one religion or one language or one ethnicity, one region over the rest, and that would make it unviable to sustain all this country together. Whereas in a democracy, as we have been able to maintain in our country, you are able to ensure that everyone feels they have an equal stake and equal opportunities, that they are able to find their own place in the sun in cooperation and contestation with each other, and that in that process, each of their identities is equally valid, because India is a land of multiple identities, where you can be many things in one thing. You can be a good Bengali, a good Muslim, and a good Indian all at once. That ultimately is what makes India itself such a special place. And it gives us, in some ways, a peculiar coexistence of diversities. I sometimes found myself telling American audiences when I was living in New York that if America is a melting pot, well, we're not. What we are in India is a thali. A thali, for those of you who haven't been to Indian restaurants, I'm told that Bogota has yet to have a good Indian restaurant, so you may have to wait for that. But a thali is a big steel plate on which your dishes come in a number of different bowls. Each dish is in a different bowl, so it doesn't necessarily flow into the next. But they all belong together on the same plate. And they combine on your palate to give you a satisfying repast. So that is the Indian experience of diversity. And as you all know, in a democracy, you don't really need to agree all the time. So long as you agree on the ground rules of how you do business. This, I think, is the ultimate secret of how we've been able to pull together this nation with such great diversity. And we choose democracy over any other form of government, notwithstanding the temptations to go in other directions, at a time where there are huge challenges of development, huge challenges of diversity, and indeed challenges of insurrection, of violence, of rebellion in many parts of our country, for which in other countries the time-honored response has been that of dictatorship or autocracy. It is a matter, I think, of great satisfaction that democracy has prevailed and is growing stronger in our two countries despite these challenges in both Colombia and India. And although Indian democracy drew in large measure on British constitutional and legal systems,